Hi, my name is Rebecca Wayland, and I'm here today from Trident Proposal Management to talk about Polaris. This is an upcoming GWAC being released by GSA. And for today's topic, we want to run through 5 reasons why you may not want to bid on GSA Polaris. And we're also going to cover whether or not there's any wiggle room with the eligibility criteria. So not every business is going to be a fit for this contract. It's a very exciting opportunity. We know that it's going to have a ceiling of at least about $28 billion, possibly even higher. They haven't actually set it yet. And we know that it's going to be a long run time. So minimum 5 years, but more likely 10 years. This is also the contract that's replacing Alliant to Small Business, if you're familiar with that one. So very exciting opportunity, but there are some pretty strict eligibility requirements. And we're going to go through some of those as part of this conversation about reasons why you might want to think twice about bidding on the contract and determining whether or not it's really right for your company. So reason number 1 to not bid would be if you're not a small business. And there's a couple caveats here when it comes to eligibility. But basically, in order to be eligible for this contract, you and your teammates need to be considered a small business in NAICS code 541512. There's going to be 3 pools. There's a small business pool, a woman-owned small business pool, and a hub zone pool. So if you're one of those categories, great. If you're not, there's not really a lot of wiggle room here. So unfortunately, if you are a large business or if you're a small business that does not perform in that NAICS code, or you're not considered a small business in that NAICS code, you're not going to be eligible to bid in a traditional way. There is an opportunity, if you're a large business, to get onto this contract if you are involved in a mentor-protege relationship or a joint venture relationship. And we're going to have a separate series of blogs and videos talking about that. But the bottom line takeaway for this is that if you're not a small business, or if you're not a woman-owned small business, and you're not a hub zone small business, this contract really is not for you. If you have any questions about your eligibility, we actually have an eligibility checklist that you can download from our website that walks you through a lot of the other criteria. But this one we wanted to mention first because it is a showstopper. Another reason why you might not want to bid is if you're not an IT services company. And this sounds intuitive. This Polaris is going to be an IT services contract, but people see an opportunity to get on a really exciting bid, and sometimes they don't think through what the work is actually going to look like. If you're not an IT services company strictly, but you're still interested in this contract, you might be able to get on to a team, particularly if there's an emerging technology that you can offer. You offer IT products, or you perform some of the services that are identified in the NAICS within the draft RFP tangentially, but it's not your core offering. So if you read through the draft RFP, you're going to notice that very IT service-centric, right, to be expected, but the government acknowledges that sometimes there are going to be tangential products and services that accompany the core IT services. So they have made an exception where if you're in that category, like I said, a teaming relationship might be a really good option for you, so that you can round out the skill sets and capabilities being provided by another offerer. If you need help finding a team, please get in touch with us. You can email our info@tridentproposals.com address, and we can help you with finding a team, whether you're looking at a priming relationship or a subcontracting relationship. Another reason why you might not want to bid on Polaris is if you don't have the right projects. And I want to pause here and give you a little bit of background about what Polaris is and the type of contract that, the type of solicitation that it's shaping up to be. So this is not going to be your usual proposal where there's a technical volume and a management volume and a staffing plan and a transition plan and a lot of narrative sections. This contract at the IDIQ level is very focused on past performance. And you being able to demonstrate capability in certain performance areas. And so what I mean by that is that as part of the solicitation, you're going to have to submit a lot of PWS or statements of work from existing contracts to prove that you actually provide these services to the government or to a commercial entity. There's some guidelines and language around that in the draft RFP. But you're not going to be able to creatively write your way onto this proposal. So if you have the work, you're in good shape. If you don't have qualifying projects, you're not going to score points. when it comes to the evaluation. And the government has not released a score sheet yet. They're working on it, but we have a draft score sheet that I'll talk about in a minute. So I mentioned that you're going to have all of these past performance projects, and there are certain criteria that these projects need to meet. And so if you don't have a good collection of projects that fit these criteria, you may not be eligible for a bid, or at least an award, right? Because the way that the government's going to score this is there's points awarded for each category. And so the highest, the bidders who are going to be successful are the ones who can accrue the most points in the scoring. So reasons that a project may not score you points is if it doesn't meet the minimum threshold in terms of dollar value, if it falls outside of the recency requirements, or if it doesn't meet the requirements for the minimum duration. So you have to have been doing the work recently and for a certain period of time in order for it to qualify. If it's a very simple and straightforward project that's not going to score you any additional points, it may not be the best project to nominate for the government. So an example of this is if it was just you, your company alone providing services to one government customer in a CONUS location, so no teammates, not a very expanded scope of work, it's not going to score a lot of points. And like I said, scoring the most points is really the best strategy here so that you can come out at the top of the pile when it comes to your ranking against other offers. What's buried in here is that, we're looking at this from the negative side, right? But if you're looking at your projects and trying to evaluate which ones to pick, if you have a broad team, if you were doing OCONUS work, if you were serving multiple government customers, all of those things are going to score you additional points. And so those are the projects that we recommend prioritizing. If your projects really only cover a limited number of the performance areas or emerging technology listings, and the government has been very clear on what those are going to be, so you can check those out in the draft RFP. There's 6 main performance areas, and then there's a list of emerging technology areas. But if your projects don't really align to those, or they're really strong only in one area, again, you're not going to be able to score a lot of points, and it's not going to total up to a higher score for the team. Another reason why you may not want to nominate certain projects is if you didn't perform very well, or if your ratings were kind of mediocre. So satisfactory is perfectly okay in some circumstances, but you're not going to get extra points for having a satisfactory rating. You really want to look at contracts where your CPARs or your ratings from the government have involved, outstanding scores, because again, it just drives that point value up. So if you need help, I've mentioned this already, but if you need help determining whether or not you have a good project to submit to the government, we have developed a self-assessment project form that you can download, and it walks you through all of the project elements. So what were the periods of performance? Who were the government customers? Where was the work performed? What did the team construct look like? And you can kind of start to get this information organized. I do just want to note that this is all based off of the government's draft RFP, and they have not, as of making of this video, released point values for the different categories. With that being said, you can still take a baseline evaluation to know if a project meets the minimum criteria and how well it's going to score or where it's going to be ranked among your eligible projects. So this is still a worthwhile exercise in understanding exactly what the project components were and how it could potentially rank amongst the projects that you can nominate. Okay, another reason why you might want to think twice about a bid is if the infrastructure of your company is too small to prime. I mentioned that this is a GSA contract, and so that brings with it a footprint, right? There's going to be very specific requirements about how to manage and provide delivery under the IDIQ. Just as an example, you're going to need a dedicated program manager who can be the GSA's belly button, so that they can reach out to if there's questions, trouble, anything like that. There's website and marketing requirements. So thinking through whether or not your company is really in a position to put extra man hours towards the minimum criteria, it's a really worthwhile exercise right now. So specific reasons that you might want to think twice about a bid here. These are not hard and fast. This is a recommendation that we have based on companies that we've seen be successful and not be successful in the government contracting realm when it comes to these large GWACs. So if your revenue threshold is less than about $5 million, or if a lot of your portfolios in the commercial sector, this may not be a great contract for you. Likewise, if you only deal in commercial contracts, you're going to have a hard time scoring points. And it's because of things, whether intentional or not, the solicitation requirements right now kind of favor government contractors because there's things like auditing of the financial systems and ratings that the government delivers that will just score points, score more points for projects if they're in the DoD sector or in the federal sector. So if you're in the commercial sector, it's not an automatic disqualifier. Just know that you're not going to be eligible for a lot of those extra points because most likely the government certifications and authorizations and audits that are in place for government contracts won't be in place for commercial contracts. Another reason to pass on the bid might be if your internal contracts and business development resources are already at capacity managing existing work. It's going to take a lot of focused effort to drive customers to use this IDIQ once it's in place. So it's not an automatic system where you get the IDIQ and all of a sudden you have revenue just walking through your door. You're going to have to do a little bit of marketing. You're going to have to do some upkeep. And so if you're already really busy, just think twice about whether this is a road you want to go down. The good news is that if you have an infrastructure problem, there's still time before the RFP comes out to make some strategic changes, and that might include outsourcing some of your services or taking a hard look at business development and figuring out if you can make changes now to support your long-term growth and goals. It might be time, if you've been considering an expansion or bringing on more people, this might be the time to do it so that you don't miss out on this very exciting GSA contract over the next 5 years. They do expect that there's going to be some on-ramp periods, but they have not put out information about how frequently that's going to happen or if the criteria are going to be the same or how viable of an option that's going to be. So we'd rather you get prepped now for this 5 to 10 year contract, right? Because 5-year base with some option periods expected, than count on ramping later down the road. Okay, so the final reason we're going to talk about today is if you have commitment issues, and we're kind of kidding with this, but I've already mentioned that if you get the IDIQ, that's not the end of the story, right? You're really going to have to put some time and resources towards making sure that you're driving customers to use the IDIQ. And so if you meet any of these criteria, you might want to just think hard about whether or not you're ready to make the investment in Polaris. So if your company has been off-ramped from a GSA schedule before because you didn't meet the minimum contracting threshold in terms of dollar value, then you're going to want to think about what you're going to do differently so that that doesn't happen on Polaris, because there will be a minimum threshold involved. If you're really good at getting on IDIQs, but then you don't win any subsequent work, if this describes you, you might want to think hard about bidding on Polaris again, or altering your strategy and what you've been doing to date. If you have a history of passing on bids because you're too busy when the solicitation is released, I want to foot stomp this a little bit, because the way that it works with GSA is, we've already narrowed down the pool of offers by forming this IDIQ, right? So when they release a requirement, the response timeline may not be 30 days. It could be as short as 10 days. It could be 30 days, it could be 45 days. But if you're not ready to turn on contracts in a very quick way, and you're just always constantly busy, which is a good problem to have, but it may mean that Polaris isn't the right investment for your company. And the other thing that you might want to consider is if you don't have a formal business development team in place right now, and instead it looks like some conglomeration of your president or somebody who's doing this as a collateral duty or in an ad hoc basis, then this is maybe not the right contract, because as I mentioned earlier, there's a footprint that comes with getting on a GSA contract, especially a GWAC. And so there's a baseline level of effort that you're going to have to put in to make sure that you're using this contract to its full advantage and really driving business to it. The government won't do that for you. And then the other criteria might be is if you're a business development team, if you have one and they're in place, but they're really focused on defending existing work and not expanding it. So if you like the idea of working with GSA, but you're not willing to commit those resources, then Polaris is not going to be a good match for your company. The good news is that if you still are interested in pursuing a bid, there are certain things you can do to build in more capacity at your company. Give us a call or shoot us an email. We'd love to talk to you about how we can help you outsource some of those services in the BD and in the contracts realm so that your team is freed up to focus on Polaris. There's certain responsibilities that you won't be able to delegate, But for a lot of the things happening in the background, whether it's your pipeline management, market researching, opportunity identification, those are things that we can help with so that you can stay focused on being a great offerer and provider to the government. Okay, so if you have any questions, please check out our website. We have a recurring webinar that we're hosting, and we also have blog posts available that you can look through at your leisure. Or if you want to get in touch and have a consultation, please reach out. We'd be happy to help you work through any questions that you have and really evaluate whether or not Polaris is going to be a good match for your company. Thanks so much.